Media industry sustains, right? And looking at some of the challenges that we were facing. This was including like the challenges that we had in the war-torn areas like the Ukraine. We have Gaza. We have so many other places where our journalists are struggling and reporting. But we also have the war from the financial aspect of things as well, where mainstream medias are shifting to the digital age, right? We were talking about digitization, transition to digital eras. But as we talk on those areas, we now talk about the AI age, right? Yes, it's still digital, but then AI brings a different aspect to it, right? So, where does journalism stand? How many of us know in today's context how much trust the public have on journalism? Any guesses? In Sri Lanka, or at least globally, or in any particular country? So I was referring to this report by IPSO, UK, right, called the Veracity Report, which they conduct every year. And they have conducted among a sample size around 1,015 people above the age of 16 plus. And the interesting fact is that the trust in journalism has increased from 2023 to 2024, which is a positive sign. But nobody wants to ask me what is the current percentage of journalism trust. The current trust in journalism is only 27%. The politicians are even further lower, right? Their trust levels are even further lower. And then you have the others. But the topmost level basically are the nurses, the medical staff. You also have the business sector that are already up there, right? But the good indicators like maybe the trust in journalism is gradually picking up again, given the fact that there are so much of misinformation and disinformation out there, false information. And now with AI, the challenge of knowing whether this is truth or whether this is false is becoming even more harder visually. Right? It's not only text-based, even visually, right? That also brings the challenge of journalists, right, trying to pave their way through good journalism through mainstream media versus the social media, right? We have citizen journalism. Yes, we all communicators. Why do we do this? We do this in order to ensure that we can uphold democratic ideals. We have a strong democracy. That's the main reason, right? But we are moving towards a challenging era. So today we have actually themed the entire discussion around what is the challenge in today's context. Some of the challenges have been there throughout, but the newest challenge that we find is the AI. So today we have an eminent panel that will basically discuss and talk to us and tell us how do we maneuver through this current challenge of AI, right? Because one of the reports, I mean, if you read the Reuters and Oxford report that was released recently, the 2025, you will find that most of the newsrooms are investing their resources in AI, and then they're moving into the other social media platforms. If FB is up here in Sri Lanka, globally FB is going down, right? We are looking at Insta and the other platforms that are coming up there, YouTube, Insta coming up there, right? The report also says it's a matter of time, right? Right, where people will start using Alexa, right, Siri, to access their news. You get up in the morning and you say, Alexa, what's the current news? People might not even go to the news websites or not even go to the news channels, not even go to the social media site because people will become so dependent on tools that AI will provide, right? So in this type of a scenario, in this complexity, how do we ensure that good journalism matters? Because at the end of the day, journalism is what keeps a strong democracy, right? It's a watchdog and it actually upholds good democracy. If journalism goes off, then we have a huge struggle whom to trust when to trust, what to trust. The authenticity becomes a huge question, right? So, in that context, in that background, today we basically move into this session, right? Talking about how do you make the best out of it, right? AI is not the devil, right? AI can also be a savior, right? That's where we are. When newsrooms actually being shrunk, now we are talking about how AI can become a tool for you to generate your content, generate in a faster manner, so that it can actually provide relevant information to the public. So, with that note, I will leave it to Pamodi so that we can listen to the expert panel who will basically share with us the challenges of AI, how do we harness it, and how do we keep good journalism going there so that the newsrooms and the news agencies and journalists could sustain themselves and keep democracy alive. Thank you.
Thank you, Kumar. Next, I invite Piyumi Fonseka, journalist at the Thomas Reuters Foundation, to continue with the panel discussion.
We have experts from reporting in conflict zones to leading digital first newsrooms to researching how algorithms and technology shape the information that we all consume. Together, they will help us to understand how we can best use AI without making it an enemy. Please let me introduce our panelist. We have Mr. Amal Jayasinghe. Amal has led Agents France Press AFP's coverage in Sri Lanka and the Maldives since 1987, after starting out at the Daily News. Over nearly 4 decades, he has reported from conflict zones, including Afghanistan and Iraq, and he has covered Sri Lanka's most defining moments, from war and politics and disasters to recovery. Then we have Mr. Janeeth Rodrigo with over 18 years of experience in media. Janeeth has helped traditional news brands transition from print to digital. He is also the founder of Digital Turtles, a digital strategy and advocacy organization. He has also founded Idea Health, Sri Lanka's only YouTube-approved multi-channel network. He was previously the general manager of Derana Macro Entertainment. Great to have you on board, Janeeth. Please come and get seated. Then we have Ms. Merl Chandana. Merl leads the data algorithms and policy team at LIRNEasia, where he focuses on using data science to craft practical solutions and policy insights for the public good. He is also involved in committees developing Sri Lanka's national AI strategy, where he has served on the responsible AI pillar and regulatory subcommittee. Great to have you on board as well. Before we dive into the main discussion, I would like to start with a simple question. For Merl, we hear this word algorithm everywhere. Could you just explain to us in simple terms what is an algorithm, especially in the context of news?
Yeah, I don't think the technical definition of an algorithm makes a lot of sense. An algorithm is a bit of a misnomer when it comes to what we are speaking about. So, an algorithm typically is just a series of steps defined precisely to get something done. But that's not exactly what we are talking about. With respect to our discussion, algorithm refers to the algorithm shaped society that we are living in, its various influences and so on. So I think an algorithm also, like in the age of AI, is fed with tons and tons of data about personal data, about you operating on platform, being on social media, but also like non-personal data, like texts, like books that have been published, like everything like Humanity Road book and that have been designed. So like all of this data is fed into algorithms and create these giant models. And these models have like various. I think we probably need to talk about at least 2 types of AI models or algorithms. The first is generative AI, and it's like the kind of AI everybody knows. ChatGPT, Gemini, Notebook, and this is generative AI. What is generative AI? It's like trained on almost entirety of human knowledge, text, video, audio. And when you prompt these models, it's able to give you like very real looking and sometimes even real, most of the time real, but it's that to prompt that query that you have. But what this also means is it can easily mislead because these are not perfect models. These are based on the base cases that a model will have based on your response. And it is incredibly easy to generate text, generate videos, generate images. And everybody can be a journalist and produce content. And it has like various filters. So that's one set of algorithms. The second set of algorithms are recommender systems. I think this has been around now for like almost 2 decades. These are things that appear on your feed, your YouTube feed, your social media feeds, and the ones like one, even though you and your friend are on YouTube, you are going to have entirely different feeds based on what you engage with, what you interacted with, and you will see different realities about how good or how bad you are. So the hyper personalization that is created by AI is also a set of AI algorithms. And this creates, I think, tremendous and distorts incentives for various people because like traditionally there was an incentive to pursue truth and report on the facts. But now these platforms, social media platforms, are based on the engagement and the number of clicks. And like when you see something, if you click and land on a page, then that adrenaline attached to it. So the incentives around like how to craft things, like what you report, those incentives are distorted, and what counted as like good journalism, I think still holds. But what people are perceiving, I think, is materially distorted, and it has like various complications. So it's really the combination of generative AI and the recommender systems that's really creating the page to detect it.
Thank you, Merl. That really sets the stage for us. Amal, I would like to bring you near. As Merl said, today often news we get through the feeds, even before it is verified. So, how do you think journalists can make sure that main fundamental things like accuracy, context, and the truth still preserves when the systems designed reward the opposite?
Thanks. What's really happening is, thanks to this explosion, first it was the social media explosion, and then you have now this AI generated stories and pictures and even videos. So what we are really seeing is that thanks to all this, the premium or the value placed on traditional journalism is actually on the rise. A few years ago, we saw the trust that our audiences had in traditional news sources was not very great. As I think Kumar made the point, there was a time when people didn't place much trust, or they didn't, the credibility of the news industry was pretty low. But now it's gone up because you're also seeing sort of full circle now. People, there was a time when people used to say, if you go back, I mean, I can go back 40 years, people, when they want to spread a rumor, they said, we heard it on the BBC. Actually, the BBC never broadcast it, but they would sort of say it was on. I heard it on the BBC to attach some credibility. Then with the internet, suddenly people are saying, "Oh, I saw it on the internet," as if internet was a source. So whatever you saw on the internet was right, was the absolute truth. And you saw that happening with social media also. Now we've gone the full circle, and people are now going back to the traditional news outlets like the BBC, the CNN, or Al Jazeera, or wire services, or for that matter, even the local newspapers. You want to go to a newspaper website to verify what you saw or what you heard on YouTube and stuff like that. So I think it's we are fairly, I am sort of fairly optimistic with all this evolution of technology, that suddenly there is a sort of value placed on traditional, what we call good old-fashioned journalism. I think that's what Kuba, you wanted me to talk to everyone about, the sort of good solid old-fashioned journalism, I think, is coming back, in the sense that the as AI can generate all kinds of things, but there are things that AI cannot do. AI cannot talk to a person. AI cannot question a CEO. They can't question a minister. So, but it'll help us. I mean, the main point is we have to use AI as a very effective tool to make life a little easier for us. But at the same time, the value placed on traditional news organizations, the sort of credible news media, I think is going up. The people now tend to, whenever they see something which is too good to be true, it's not true. So the way you verify is that you try and see, then you now go to the BBC website and see, did this plane crash really happen, or did you know? And then there are sites which are actually built on fact checking. I mean, fact checking is basically the foundation of journalism. I mean, it's nothing new, but people have created a new business out of fact checking because there is a premium on that. So, come back to the question: the whatever sort of fancy stuff that you may see on all kinds of sites or AI might produce, I think we are again going back to good old-fashioned journalism, where accuracy, fairness, ethics, they are at a premium. So I think the for me the good thing is that we talked about challenges the industry is facing, but in spite of all that, I think the future is not as bleak as it was made out to be.
Thank you, Amal. You made a really valid point. Picking up on that, Janeeth, I'm just quoting a recent LIRNEasia study where they found that 2/3 of Sinhala news consumers have encountered false or misleading information, and over half of those have admitted to having shared such information themselves. Given such findings, what kind of responsibilities do you think platforms, newsrooms, and journalists have to counter this kind of trends? And what do you think they need to do well?
Thanks, Piyumi. I think you're talking about a big pandemic that we had, right? It's the share as received pandemic, right? You've seen it everywhere. People assume that by saying shared as received, they indemnify themselves of any responsibility of spreading fake news, right? So thankfully, I concur with Amal here. I think good journalism is coming back. I feel like technology, everything in history is like a pendulum, right? We swing this way and we go to the extreme and then we come this way, right? So right now, I think there is definitely a premium on good journalism. However, like we've all discussed both here and outside, right? It's the rate at which our traditional newsrooms have transitioned that has been a problem, right? So my background, I started my career at a newspaper, then I was at a broadcaster. So I've helped and seen both these organizations transition, right? It's sad, but the good thing is I think the overall tone of this panel discussion is more positive because I feel like we're all looking at AI as an opportunity here, right? There are challenges, right? I think before anything I say at this panel discussion, I have to give a big disclaimer. I broadly believe that AI should have guardrails. There is none right now, globally, regionally, locally, right? So we have to work on that. That being said, I feel like this is the best opportunity us as journalists, us in the news media, have ever gotten. Because one of the biggest things I hear when I go and help an organization transition to digital is where are the budgets, right? Most of the time the answer to that question is in their question itself, because if you do digital media properly, there is revenue in it. One. Number two, with AI, there's a lot of ways you can reduce cost, right? We are already training voice agents based on some key news anchors in Sri Lanka. So without their input, right, without any labor on their end, right, obviously with the right permissions, like I said, guardrails are important, right? But with voice agents, with AI avatars, there's a lot we can do, right? So that resource gap, Piyumi, I feel is improving, right? Because I have my background helping creators, the creator ecosystem. Creators have become journalists themselves now. right? So I feel like your question needs a two-part answer. One is yes, the traditional newsrooms need to start using these tools. Their voice needs to be louder, because in terms of an internet share of voice right now, right? In our research, this is an internal research we did for a client. The share of voice online in Sri Lanka for traditional news brands is about 30%. 70% is taken up by content creators who are themselves journalists now, right? So we need to upskill these creators who are the new form of journalists, because whether they know it or not, they are spreading news. They have a big community, and newsrooms, vice versa, need to borrow a few things from the creator playbook. One, newsrooms start to create communities. We need to start creating communities, something that we have as news brands not done, right? Because in digital media, everything we do is community based. And number two, the tenacity to innovate. I feel like newsrooms have been very slow to transition to try new technologies, because we've had a way of doing things. It has always worked, right? So that's the thing, right? So I feel like, one, we need a shift in mindset in terms of our newsrooms. And like you very correctly said, people do share a lot of misinformation, and the best solution for that is a strong newsroom, a few good, strong news brands. And I feel like AI is that perfect opportunity where we can swing the pendulum back this way, where we put the trust back in the newsrooms and the journalists.
Just I had a question with you, but I'll ask it now. So you say, do you think this is not a resource issue? This is a mindset issue that journalism newsrooms do not want to change, and they want journalism to be done in a certain way.
Good question, Piyumi. I think it's hybrid. It's a combination of both, but predominantly I feel like it's a mindset issue, because a creator with a smartphone editing on CapCut, right, has over 1 million reach a week, and some news brands have 500,000 reach a week, is a problem, right? So I don't think it's a resource issue. Yes, there are incidences where we need to upskill our journalists, right, to use technology, but it's definitely not a resource issue. I feel like it's a mindset issue. And with the correct mindset, right, and the right training, I feel like our newsrooms will be upskilled enough to compete with these other digital brands, which are a share of voice. And I'll just add one more thing. I think when it comes to digital, we as news providers forget that we are in the genre, right? So when we talk about digital media, right, when I give advice to a content creator, a big brand, I always tell them to stick to their genre, right? So if it's a entertainment creator, it's entertainment, right? As news, we are competing in the category of current affairs, right? And current affairs has a lot of content creators, a lot of content. There are vlogs, there are people doing podcasts, right? This is the category we are competing in as news brands. So we have to always keep in mind, okay, this is our category. This is the type of content that's getting viewership. So what do we do? So that's, I think, a good advice. If anyone wants to be relevant in this digital age and do news, always look at yourselves as in the category of current affairs, and look at what creators are doing, look at what's getting traction within current affairs, and do content there. And that's the mindset that will help you, win this race.
Thanks, Janeeth. I'll come back to that. So we talk about algorithm, and Merl, you study algorithm. In order to reduce dependence on clicks, journalists are now experimenting with platforms like Substack. They're experimenting with newsletters, not so much in Sri Lanka. In a way to go to the readers directly. If you talk about Sri Lankan context, people are not very used to paying for news, right? So how do you think a platform like Substack will work in a country like Sri Lanka, where attention is scattered, people are not again paid, not used to paying for news? And how do you think we can create a relationship like that?
I think I have a multi-part answer to the question, and some of it Janeeth already touched upon. The first thing is, I don't think even in the developing world, most creators only rely on platforms like Substack. They diversify. They are on multiple platforms, and I think really even in Sri Lanka that has to be the case, because Substack has a particular audience, and you need to be on other platforms as well. You can think of them as funnels and directing to your core product, and even like YouTube and ad-based revenue. I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea that you are getting ad-based revenue. So it's really figuring out like what your strengths and like core competencies are. Maybe you are good on video. If you're good on video, you can like do short form video to direct traffic to your more longer pieces of content, your podcasts. And I think there are enough creators, and Janeeth will attest to this, like who can make a living on Patreon or like other platforms, like these emerging platforms. So it can't be just like one platform, and you sort of need to be smart about what your strengths are and direct traffic. And to just address your point about like attention being scattered, I think the emerging research on this, and correct me if I'm wrong, is suggesting that like it's not just that attention spans are reducing, attention is becoming a barbell shape, which means it's like it's shrunken in the middle, but there's enough appetite for longer form content as well. There's like longer podcasts, 2 hour, 3 hour podcasts are being consumed. Even in Sri Lanka, you see like 1 hour, 2 hour podcasts, people do listen, but then people also are on TikTok, they are also on YouTube. So which means that like presented properly with like the right level of attraction, people are willing to listen. So you need to leverage both sides of the coins to figure out, yes, there are certain maybe deeper dives where it's news cycles just does not allow you to cover, but people have hunger for that information. So you need to be creative about that as well. And I think like Janeeth said, like the process of creation has been infinitely accelerated by these tools. Like now you can just simply type things into a prompt and get a YouTube thumbnail. It's like almost 99% accurate. You might need to make a few changes. And like even your transcriptions, there are like all kinds of things that you can do. So while like any one model, like maybe long form journalism, Substack might not get you the revenue, but it's still important, especially if you are good at long form writing, narrative storytelling. There will be audience for that. But then you need to supplement with like other methods of engagement using these tools and methods available.
Amal, we talk about trust, and trust has an economic value as well, right? So, how do you think a newsroom should convert trust into a sustainable income without eroding that trust?
No, this the question. It's a very good question. I think all the news organizations in the country today are grappling with that. I think everyone, without exception, would be making losses these days. So news is a very expensive business. So if you really go back to some of the news organizations, the motive was not necessarily profit. Some had political ambitions, some had business interests, and then after 5 years they folded up. So I think there will be winners and losers at the end of it. So there may be some newspapers will have to. I think they are already closing. Some have already closed. Some more will go down the same road. So there will have to be some kind of consolidation, and obviously we'll end up with some. Some may survive. Some might have to sort of think of uh, joining or uh, sort of having collaboration with other channels. So I think we will see the evolution of news organizations, because they need to sort of face this current crisis. The It is true that we are building trust now. People are sort of slowly coming back, and sort of the readership, to some extent, the readership is increasing, but it's not enough to give you a kind of financial sort of return to be able to sort of adapt the new technology and stuff like that. So it's a bit of a tricky thing. I'm not sure how they're going to navigate this thing, but what I feel is that there will always be a place for traditional journalism. The how that is communicated to the audience, that's really the question. The I mean, for the last 2,500 years, I think the fundamentals of journalism have not changed. I mean, things like accuracy, the content interpretation, accountability, ethics, all that have remained the same. The way we communicated with our audiences changed. So that's where the real challenge is. So whether the newspapers can be a little leaner, the way we have structured, we are spending a lot of money on sort of very routine stuff that can be now handled by AI. For example, you spend a reporter to cover cricket. Should he be doing the scorecards when it can be done by AI much faster? So there are a lot of things. And then you have financial journalists doing exchange rates, stock markets. You're tying up people to do that. But that kind of thing can be passed on to you can automate that kind of thing. That has already been done. I think even before AI, people like Reuters and Bloomberg, they had already done it decades ago. But it's getting even better. Now we have news agencies. For some of the sports reports, we are having machines writing the stories. Of course, there is a gatekeeper who will look at it before it's actually released to the, I mean, validate it on the wire for everyone to read. So, but this is a big challenge. The newspapers will have to decide whether they can weather this storm. I mean, if those who survive this, I think will go on to do pretty well. And what the trend we are also seeing is people are no longer putting out their content free. They're sort of, if you look at the big newspapers, they're going away from this the giving out everything free. I think the golden era of the internet is over. So people will have to pay for. I mean, nobody likes to pay for their information, but at the same time, there are people who are willing to fork out some cash when they know that if you're in a position where you need your information is critical for you. So I think we will see a trend again. The people willing to pay now. For example, ChatGPT is free at the moment, but if you want the full potential of ChatGPT, you'll have to pay, and then they'll entice you to do all kinds of things. And after you get it to draw 3 pictures, say, okay, your quota is over. If you want the next one, you pay $10, $10. So the that too, I mean, we have to keep in mind all these people are trying to sort of increase they're sort of giving it out free to you, hoping that you will come back to them. At some point, you will have to pay. Not, there is no free lunch anywhere. So newspapers will have to weather this period, and I think if they can survive the next year or two, then they might be in a good position. But I think we are in a very critical phase where the newspapers, and particularly not only the newspapers, even the television networks, are really threatened with extinction.
I just have one more question for you, Amal, before we end the topic. We talked about trust a lot, but financial independence of a journalist is a big issue in Sri Lanka. How important do you think that journalists should be financially independent in order to resist the chase of clicks and engagement and sensationalism without, just to continue their balanced reporting?
I mean, it goes without saying. If you're not financially independent, then it's a bit difficult for you to do your job. I mean, I'll give you an example. Once in Bombay, a reporter walked into a newspaper office and said, "Please, I would like to be your financial reporter." And the editor said, "Look, you have what qualifications do you have? Blah blah blah." They had a discussion, and the guy said, "Please hire me. I don't want a salary." The editor said, "How on earth you're going to work for us for free?" He said, "No, just give me the press card. That's enough." The turns out that a lot of the business and finance reporters who are working in Bombay, their main source of revenue was not from their employer, but from the people who invite them for press conferences. So one of the things, you go for a press conference, you ask them, where are the documents? When you ask for the documents, you're not asking for the press release, but it's a folder inside which you have either cash or vouchers. So this is a really terrible thing. I mean, it's in India. Then the same extension of that, there were some journalists in India who were taken on a guided tour of a factory. At the end of the tour, this the company which organized this, they gave a whole big sort of sack of their products, aluminium products, and gave it to him. And he was sort of enraged. He said, "How dare you insult me? How dare you give me this thing at the end of this thing?" He said, "Don't you know I am the news editor of, he mentioned a news agency in Madras. I am the news editor of this. How dare you insult me and give me this bag? Here is my card. Please have it delivered to my address. So it's I'm also worrying not so much about the independence of journalists, but also the independence of our media organizations, and particularly at the current time where they are going through really bad period. How many of you read that Softlogic Group chairman, that there was an arrest warrant against him, and then he eventually surrendered to court, and he has been granted bail, 500,000 rupees in cash. How many of you read it in the newspapers in the last 2 days? I don't think any one of you read it. Yes, we have a hand up there. Yeah, just where did you read it? I can help you there. I'm sure you saw it on social media. Yeah. Right? That's because somebody mentioned the name, but not a single. I can tell you, I've looked at this. Not a single. That is advertising pressure. I mean, there's nothing. I am not blaming the journalists at all. I'm not even blaming the newspaper, because we are going through such a bad time. Every rupee in ad revenue is crucial. So this is clearly the reason. I mean, it's a good example of how advertising revenue can be leveraged to not so much to publish something, but actually to keep it away. I mean, when I joined the Daily News in the early 1980s, there was a time when we used to publish divorce cases. I mean, you don't see them now. I mean, it's a good thing that divorce. Nobody writes about divorce stories, right? So the story was, if you want to get if you want to get your divorce story in the newspaper, you have to pay 10 rupees to the journalist. But if you want to keep it out of the newspaper, you have to pay 20 rupees. So I mean, we've had a tradition of corruption in our business. I mean, we are not goody two shoes. Although we what we try to do is everything is ethical. We want others to be ethical. We write about corruption. We talk about corruption in politics, in the police, in the Attorney General's department, all that. But I think we have to sort of look at ourselves also, the way we have worked. But on top of that, the question you raised about financial independence or the financial strength, or are they remunerated? I mean, we can have another long conversation whether journalism is a profession in Sri Lanka. So I'll be the first to admit that we have some serious problems on our side. So these need to be addressed.
Thank you, Amal. Picking up on that, Merl, you said that people still appreciate long form investigative work. But I myself has experienced this. Let's imagine a scenario where a trusted journalist with years of experience spends months and even years investigating corruption or some issue and publishes the story to, let's say, 20,000 readers. And an influencer or a TikToker takes that content and makes a viral explainer and gets like 2 million views. So the influencer has sponsorship deals. At the same time, the original journalist struggles to pay rent. So is this the democratization of journalism that we are talking about? And I think even other experts can actually weigh on that. Are we not killing the journalism that we depend on?
Hi.
I know you need a moment to think about it. It's a
I think I can start answering it. I mean, there's no doubt that like people who build on like existing raw content and package it nicely, package it in more attractive ways are going to inevitably like extract revenue from that. I think part of my answer is also in my previous answer where you just cannot rely on just one medium and be done with it, because like going to a newspaper, going online or buying a newspaper and reading a long form of journalism, I don't think is a tractable version anymore. Maybe then what you do is you do a breakdown. Maybe it's a podcast. You invite guests around a topic and you have a conversation. You have to be creative about it. You can't just say, I put in like hours and hours effort into this. People should appreciate. That's not like how the world works. But having said that, I think there's like also like on the public side, there's an onus on the public to appreciate like this kind of journalism. I think more awareness about like people who do serious work. And I think there's like, without naming names, yeah, you find on social media like people with established credibility, people actually like rely on them for like long form investigative journalists. The crowd appreciating that might be smaller, but there's established credibility, and sort of they are your like first people who will dig out this information. Like, are we killing journalism? I'll let maybe the expert answer on that, but I think there's no, I mean, you can't be sort of like black and white about it and be like I mean, we only be in like certain way of like operating. It's not gonna work.
Amal, what do you think about it?
I think we are in a sad situation where newsrooms today spend an enormous amount of money on creating content, and then before it gets to their audience, television stations in the morning read the newspapers, basically bring you the news, and then in a much more for you, while you're doing your work, you don't have to read the newspaper. Everything in the newspaper is being sort of dished out to you. Now the point is, this is happening at a time when television stations, for them, that's the most lucrative belt time, the most lucrative time for them in terms of getting advertising revenue, and they make a fortune out of that by spending virtually nothing, just getting a guy to sit in front of a camera and read a newspaper, and also add his 2 cents worth to whatever a reporter has produced, and then the newspaper doesn't get anything. They initially thought they were getting a lot of publicity on television, and more people will go out and buy the newspaper. That didn't happen. Right? Now, newspaper circulation has dropped. The television stations are making money on this. The question is, at some point, if the newspapers don't produce this content, then in the morning you won't have anything to read in your today's newspaper brief. There won't be anything. So it's a real catch-22. I've actually tried to take it up with the newspaper society, the editors guild, because at the end of the day, we need good old-fashioned journalism to survive, because it's in the interest of all of us. At the end of the day, we need the Daily Mirror, the Lankadeepa, the Daily News. We need all these people to survive for us to have a thriving and a vibrant democracy. If we don't have, I mean, you may not agree with what appears in in some newspaper or the other. You may not like an article in the Island, or you may not like something in the Daily News. But at the end of the day, they can be. I mean, if to put it in a cynical way, they can be lies, but in a democracy, there are different lies. Right? So we need this. By sometimes one part of our media outlets swallowing the other will undermine all of us. So the question of, we come back to the financial viability of journalism today. So how do we have new revenues? How do we use the new technology, the AI? I mean, one of the things I keep thinking is, these large language models need an enormous amount of data. I mean, you guys are very familiar with how much data you need, and then in Sinhala and Tamil, our newspapers have massive archives. They are sitting on massive archives which can be monetized. So at what point are we going to do that? Are we really ready to do that? Have we digitized our archives to be able to harness this potential from the libraries the archives we have? So I think journalism will have to look for revenue not just from selling the news, but also your archives, the photographs that you have for the last 150 years. So I am positive in the sense that I think even though today we are not selling newspapers, but what we have accumulated over several decades can be turned into cash. But the question is, how are we going to do it? In theory, it's possible. I mean, you guys are experts. You tell me if it is not so. But I think we need to find a way, and I think the starting point would be to see whether these have been the library, the archives that can be digitized. Then, so switch to some other revenue streams to keep your core business going. And I think without the core business, I think for all of us, I mean, for the entire humanity, we need to have good, strong journalism. I think that's a sort of basic thing. The day we sort of don't have that, then I think our democracy won't be as good as it should be.
Thanks, Amal. Before going to Janeeth, do you have anything to add to what Amal said?
You want to go ahead, Merl? Or?
No, I just wanted to add something like out of personal experience. It reminded me how I consume the New York Times these days. It's not through reading the paper. There are individual journalists that I follow. They write long form pieces. Then, with the backing of this institution, they create various forms of like content around it. They create short form content. They create podcasts. Podcasts are my main form of consuming that information. So they start with a journalistic base, long form investigative journalism, and with the institutional backing, they produce all kinds of other content. I think so. Thinking about individuals in media houses, newsrooms, and television, and you see like media personalities even in Sri Lanka, sort of then like that dual role of institutional backing and their credibility coming with like the skills and what the journalist uniquely has to offer and creating like value around it. I think like has to be like at least part of the solution.
Janeeth, I think this is where we need your expertise. You have been
Piyumi, sorry, just to before we go, I think I took some notes to add on what we just spoke.
Sure.
Just to add to something that Amal said, I think you touched on something very important, Amal, which is newspapers right now are sitting on a repository of data, right? Just today, Cloudflare, one of the biggest hosting services in the world, announced that they're going to charge AI that recall their data, right? So obviously data is going to be very valuable, right? And if newsrooms right now, I know some of them have the worst archives in the world because I've worked at them. They've not digitized them, right? If we can digitize our newsrooms, like all the archives, right? That data is something we can easily monetize in the short term, not even in the long. So there is definite potential there, right? And another thing that we spoke of, now we've all heard of SEO, right? Search engine optimization. We always talk about it. SEO is dying, right? People are not going to search anymore. Google itself knows this, right? That's why they put that AI answer right on top when you search. What's coming is we've not coined a word for this properly yet. I'm still using GEO. That's generative engine optimization. There are other names for this, right? People are going to ask AI, generative AI, okay, what's happening? What's the news, right? This gives an amazing opportunity. So 5 years before, when I used to like talk about newsrooms, when I worked at a television station, I used to say written content is dead. I'm very sorry I said it, right? But I used to say written content is dead. However, with GEO, with generative engine optimization, people may not be reading, but AI reads, right? AI needs data, right? And the best data that I've seen, I think Merl can add to this, right? When you train models, the more informative the data is, right? The more, when it's written like a journalist, right? The article, AI picks it up better, right? Because we've thought of all the W's, right? Who, what, where, when, why, right? We've been taught of this, right? That written content has a lot of value now. So even with some of the clients, like private sector clients we work with right now, we are focusing heavily on written content. So I feel like this is the time for the newspaper, like for the press, to really take a step up, right, and understand, okay, this is the value of written content. It's coming back, right, and really harness GEO or whatever we call it, right, generative engine optimization with long form content. So we have to understand what these AI crawlers look for when they crawl for data, right? And then if we write our articles based on that, we're good to go, right? And two more things I want to add, Piyumi, I'm sorry, because we spoke of a lot of things right now, right? I want to again clear a big misconception we have about Sri Lankans, that they are not willing to pay for news or subscriptions. Sri Lankans are currently paying a lot of money for subscriptions for things you won't believe, right? Because I have data, I'm talking from experience, right? I have 15 years of experience in a television station that harness a lot of subscriptions, right? So Sri Lankans are willing to pay subscriptions, substantial subscription. So the average subscription a Sri Lankan in the SEC A and B segment is willing to pay is about $100 a month, $100, right? So that's a lot of money. It's just that we have not harnessed that. No news brand has currently come up with a good subscription-based product that people are willing to pay for, right? So it's our problem. It's not that people are not willing to pay. Lastly, long form, right? So we always talk about short form content, TikToks, right? How do we compete? You just said like, a news piece is done and suddenly an influencer comes in, there's a short form content and go on, right? Whatever we do, we still haven't found a way to monetize short form content. 3, 5, 10-second videos, these platforms, see, at the end of the day, all of these are platform specific, right? Where do we publish this? Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, right? These platforms have not found a way to monetize short form content. So their algorithm, right, they still prefer long form, because long form, you can insert ads, you can monetize it at multiple points, right? So still they give reach to long form. And with AI, I have tools where if I give it like a 30-minute video, right, I have tools that I can create shorts unlimited, right? It picks up even Sinhalese now, right? It picks up Tamil, right? So it creates the shorts for you. So there are no excuses for us as journalists to say, okay, I've done a long form piece. Here's a creator who has done a short form and gone beyond me, right? Because one, we can do that short form ourselves. Number two, platforms prefer long form, right? So we have to harness that. It's just that we need to follow certain things, right? Have a hook within the first 10 seconds to make sure the audience knows what they're getting into, have like icebreakers every 1 minute. So there are formulas to do this, Piyumi. It's just that we've not done it properly. So there's a lot of opportunity. So that's something I want to just clear out before we went into something else.
My follow-up question I wanted to ask, you work with content creators, right? So what kind of lessons can professional journalists borrow from them to make their serious reporting more engaging without diluting the depth?
Okay, that's, I think, a very good question, because I feel like us as journalists, us in the news media, can learn a lot from content creators, right? So I will give some of the advice I give content creators, but it'll sound like I'm giving it to a content creator, but trust me, this will be very applicable for you, right?
I'm taking notes.
Okay, perfect. Stop comparing. Okay, that's the biggest problem with content creators and news people, right? We do an amazing piece, right? We see 10,000 views on our one, and we see 1 million views on someone else, and we think we are not effective, right? Sometimes when you look at the 1 million views, the average watch time is 5 seconds, right? It's a 10-minute video. They've only watched 5 seconds. So they've just opened it and gone. Platform says 1 view. It's not effective, right? So don't compare, right? Number two, be lean and agile, right? We are so bulky as news agencies. We have so much red tape, right? We need to be more lean and agile, right? So when I was at Derana, we had this thing called lead time, right? That is from the point a news drops into the newsroom, be it through a server, maybe a correspondent drops it somewhere, right? Our lead time was 1 minute 30 seconds. That means it took us only 1 minute 30 seconds to send that video out. Edit it, caption it, thumbnail it. This was before AI, right? So we have to, as newsrooms, look at our lead time, right? Okay, how long does it take for us to produce something good out of this and put it out, right? So that's where you're lean, right? Agility means, okay, technology changes, right? These platforms change. Right now, I spend about 4 hours a day learning, right? I spend 4 hours working, 4 hours learning, because that's how much this technology is changing. The platforms change, right? Just 1 week ago, YouTube launched a collaboration feature. I don't know how many of you know about it, right? Now, two people can post the same video together. Huge potential, especially for news brands, I thought, right? So we have to be agile. So that's some advice I give to creators that are very applicable, right? And lastly, I think we have to stop complaining, right? Because right now, or when I talk to any news journalist, they're like, okay, we have this resource issue, we have this resource issue, because I've consulted since I left my previous place with a few other media organizations who want to transition, right? So they always look at it from a very problem centric point of view, right? My advice is, okay, there are solutions, right? If you're willing to look for them, right? And mainly if you think that there is no value in journalism, you're not going to find it, regardless of how hard you look, right? So those three things, Piyumi, I feel like content creators are doing well. One, they don't compare, right? Because always remember the first 1,000 followers, subscribers are your hardest, right? I've said this so many times, right? 1,000 to 5,000, it gets a little better. 5,000 to 10,000, it gets a little bit better. 10,000 to 100,000 is a breeze. This is something that not a lot of people tell you, because a lot of news brands, content creators drop off before the 10,000 mark. Right? They don't see the compound effect of these platforms because they burn out or they get demotivated. Right? So there is a lot of potential if we really do go into this, and there are leaner ways of doing it. So that's my advice. A very short list, but it's effective.
Thank you, Janeeth. I want to ask Amal. We talked about how algorithms can amplify certain types of content. Do you think our journalists have started to feel the pressure in the newsroom to frame their stories in a way that algorithm will pick up?
Frankly, I'm not very sure of that. I don't know whether journalists, when they write, think in those terms. I know a few who are running websites who are very conscious of this, how it will be picked up and stuff like that, and especially in writing headlines. But in writing, in producing a news report, I don't think they are particularly looking at that. And I'm not sure whether they need to sort of do that also, because they're expected to produce straightforward news. And I mean, on algorithms, perhaps you can come in on that. I mean, in terms of journalists, I don't think are even trained to sort of think in those terms. So they are looking at their own outlets, and you have a space to publish it. You publish it in your newspaper. It can be print or it can be on the website, and then somebody might want to tweet that. Or publish a little bit on Facebook. I don't think they're really into that. No. I mean, my answer would be journalists are not really looking into that.
Janeeth, don't you think that's the problem? That we are not trained to think about SEO, hashtags, how to make your story be seen by people. Don't you think that's a problem?
I agree with you. I think that's one of the key problems, right? We have to look at this as a structured approach, right? If we are going to be successful digitally, we have to think like a private entity, a brand, right? So for a brand voice to be heard, there are certain protocol you need to follow, right? There has to be a brand voice, all of that. And how an article is written, how a piece of content is produced for a newspaper that is print. Right? I remember when I was in newspaper, right? We have to make sure our word count is perfect. Otherwise, the sub editor just drops half my article, right? That's not there here, right? And also there's a structure for writing. I feel like, Amal, that we are completely missing out on digital, that print media journalists are not experimenting with, right? And when I mean a structure, I don't mean completely change how factually we write it, right? It's just how information is given, so that different, like I said, now even geo generative engines are picking up our content, right? If we write it in that way, there's far more visibility than we can ever imagine, right now brands are doing this generative engine score, like an SEO score, right? That's if, say, you're in one X industry or a toothpaste brand in Sri Lanka, for example, you can check, okay, what are the other toothpaste brands, how well do they rank in generative engines against my brand, right? Are we doing that as journalists? No, right? So if you're talking about one topic, right, how many times does that keyword need to be mentioned in my article for a search bot, AI bot to pick it up, right? This is not rocket science, right? There could be one document I give all of you, write your articles like this, generative engines might pick it up better, and you write it from now on. That's it, right? It's just that we've not looked at it. As institutions, we've not thought that far, and I feel like that's the biggest problem. And not that the knowledge doesn't exist. Also, go and ask Gemini, go and ask ChatGPT, okay, how can I write an article that is better for generative engines, right?
So we need more training programs for journalists.
Yes, and I feel like we need to attract younger creators to be journalists. I don't know, right? I always look at problems as opportunities, right? And I see so many creators in Sri Lanka who have the knack, right? So that's why we've done a program called Create Incubate as well. But I feel like this needs to be done at scale, right? So I think people like Kumar, the SLPI, can take initiatives like this forward, right? Where we look at content creators who already have reach, right? And then train them to be better journalists, because whether they know it or not, they are doing journalism out there, right? So there are multiple ways we can tackle this. But if you're talking about traditional journalists who write content, yes, it can be written better so that things get picked up, right? And if you're doing videos, right, there are certain protocols you need to follow, the length of it. I always see like newspapers when they go into video, it's very interesting for me, right? Because I can always, like, before I watch it, I can tell you what's going to happen, right? Someone's going to give a long intro, right? They completely forget that, within the first 10 seconds someone might skip this, right? And sometimes I see podcasts that are 40 minutes long, right? And the average watch time for a podcast on YouTube is about 15 minutes, right? So we forget those key analytics. So from traditional media, Piyumi, I've helped a lot of brands transition to digital. One thing I tell them is, don't forget the data, right? In traditional media, when I was in television, we get this thing called ratings, which is like half true, right? And we base everything on that, right? With digital media, you don't have to. There's no guesswork. On a YouTube video, you can see the user watch trend, right? If they drop off at 10 minute mark, you can see, okay, what were we doing at 10 minutes? What were we showing them at 10 minutes? That made 60% of our audience drop off. So that's where we need to, I think, change our mindset, right? It's a two-way communication now, right? We don't publish something, we don't broadcast something and hope to God it works. We have data where we can improve. So we have to look at journalism as an iterative process, right? Where we, okay, do something today, improve it tomorrow. That's, I think, how we should look at it.
Thanks, Janeeth. Picking up on that, Merl, we are talking about long form investigative pieces, the value of using technology to amplify their content. But even if I write a great article or a newsletter, I need the social or search algorithms to be for that article to be found, right? So how do you see that tension when algorithms still control the discovery of that article? What can journalists realistically do about it?
I think some of it's already captured. I mean, there are ways of obviously not going into the land of clickbait, but making your title more attractive. There are certain ways of writing things. There are certain thumbnails you can like put on like your like even on written content. And of course on YouTube, I think this is huge. And I think to a degree that I find slightly annoying, even credible creators do end up like almost following the algorithm, and sometimes it pisses me off a little bit, but because they are sort of like overly driven by data. But I think it's just that like your core piece can be leveraged in like many ways. I mean, I think there's he said there's you need to sort of listen to like what the data is telling you, and you need to look at trends and what seems to be succeeding. But I also think there are like different ways of succeeding at it's just that you can't think the way you've been doing it for the past 15 years is the only way. I think there's like definitely like appetite for long form content, but it sometimes take a little bit longer than like maybe like a couple of months to build that audience, because like some of the best podcasts that I listen, and not in Sri Lanka, are like 7-8 hours long. These are like hardcore history podcasts. They are like it's very long, and there's like a and there's like a drop off at certain points, but there's like a considerable amount of people who will stick till the end, because like with things like podcasts, for example, it's the way people consume that information. It's not that just they'll like sit somewhere and do nothing and listen to a podcast. They are listening to podcasts as they are doing something else, as they're commuting, as they are doing household chores. So there's space for that. So I mean, it's just that you cannot be stuck in one mindset. You need to be open to figure out, experiment what's going to work for you, what's like more catered to your personality. You might not be, I mean, I am like generally like against like clickbait kind of journalism, but like sometimes it sticks, and there's like way of doing that as well. But then there are like other ways of doing it as well. So yeah, it's I don't think there are like easy answers, but the right answer for you need to figure out for yourself.
Thank you, Amal, for that. I'm coming back to Amal about old school journalism. How do we, what kind of role editors play making sure less important stories, not viral stories, like human development stories, uh, development issues, that kind of stories still get picked up in this race for speed and visibility? How do we make sure that less important stories get picked up?
Well, you mean whether it gets picked up by algorithms or just
Seen by the audience, whether
yeah.
it goes to the audience.
Yeah. So yeah, this is a problem. I mean, when you say less important, I think what's happening is that we are given the financial sort of situation, we are sort of taking it easy, and I don't think there is any news desk in the country today which can afford to tie up 2 or 3 journalists to work on one story. I mean, it will be very important story, investigation, that kind of. Sometimes it can go on for weeks, months, even years, and then we don't have that kind of luxury anymore. So the most of the newspapers, they are constrained to sort of do the very bare bones minimum, and right now it will be a real luxury to do what you just said. The real important stuff, the investigative stuff, to do that. I think there is a space for that. There is a need for that. People will read it. The point is, I don't know whether this obsession of chasing viral stories. It doesn't have to be. I mean, when you talk about LLMs, this language models, sometimes it'll what you write today. I mean, may not go viral in the next few days, but maybe it'll be picked up, and it'll have a life of its own sometime down the road. So at the end of the day, it's all a question of credibility of the news organization, the journalists themselves. So the whether our newspapers are financially in a position to concentrate on that kind of thing right now is a big question. But if we do spend, if we have the time and resources to invest in that kind of thing, I think we don't have to be too worried about something going viral. So the real thing is, all these things will add to the credibility of your organization. So I think it's also a question of the long haul, uh, building your own brand, building your. I mean, when people say, "Okay, I I heard it on the BBC," it's because they've sort of over the years they built a reputation, and not as if they don't get things wrong. I mean, they do get things wrong, and they're willing to admit it. So that's the difference. So but the question is, to come back to your question. The newspapers don't really have the resources to spend that kind of time and deploy staff. Uh, Whether it will happen, I mean, I'm not so sure.
I think we have come back to the original discussion we had. We are running out of time. We'd like to open it up for the audience. If you have any questions, please raise your hand, introduce yourself, and just tell us who the question is directed at. Until they get ready with the questions. Yes, please. Janeeth, until they are getting ready with the questions, I want to ask you what role does to create an outside
I don't think the big media bosses will be happy to hear this, but I feel like independent journalists as a personal brand on digital media works far better than generic brands, right? Because if you look at YouTube, right, personality driven brands are far more popular because they are able to be more relatable, right? Whereas when you look at a news brand, there's no face behind it. There are sometimes faces that come up when you hear the brand, right? But it's not a personalized experience, right? Whereas if it's a personal journalist, individual journalist, they're far more relatable, and they're able to create a community. So I feel like personal branding is very important, and if you are a journalist, I feel like you should definitely leverage personal branding. And just to add, until someone's not shy enough to ask a question, one more thing, I think you asked, like, how do we make sure certain stories don't die with this hype trending content, right? So one thing I tell creators that often is, right, whatever content you do, this is valid for news brands as well, right, falls into this theory that I've created called hero hub hygiene. It's called the 3H model, right? I see Yasmin nodding her head because she has heard this 10 times. So hero hub hygiene, right? Hero content is this viral content that we talk about in Sri Lanka, right? So as a news brand, some things you do will become hero, right? Usually what's trending in society becomes trending online, right? If people are talking about a topic right now, if you do content around it with those keywords, it can be a hero content, right? Hub content as a news brand is your bread and butter, like the daily, the news from the cabinet press briefings, the parliament sessions. That's your hub content, right? A very important type of content, Piyumi, that a lot of news brands in Sri Lanka forget is this content type called hygiene. Like Amal said, right? Some content doesn't go viral immediately, but over a long period of time, people refer to that. There are some articles on Daily News, Daily Mirror, Info Lanka back in the day when we used to check it, right? I still go back to, right? So hygiene content is a very important form of content, but it doesn't have a good short-term incentive because you don't see the views suddenly, right? Maybe you've left that organization and you see the results, right? So these three types of content as a news organization, if you all can look at, because each of those types of content needs a strategy of its own, right? Because if you're doing hygiene content, you have to look at, okay, what are people looking for, right? Because those are, YouTube terms it evergreen content. That type of content doesn't have an expiry date, right? Whereas some of these trending contents, Amal, it's very short lived. 1 week you'll get the viewers gone, right? Maybe it's 1 million. That's great. But some of the hygiene content gets 5 million views over 5 years, right? What is more important? Both are important, right? So I think that's how we should look at it. News also has these broad content categories. And if we look at, okay, this journalist is good at covering hero content, right? This journalist is great at hygiene because their research is amazing, right? So if we segment it and apply these theories to our journalism, I feel like we'll see far more like better results.
Thank you, Janeeth. Merl, we have a question? Yes, please.
I'm Rehazuddin, and I would like to make a small proposal for the aspiring journalist. When you report and you submit an article, why not take English into consideration? Because nowadays I like now actually today on I have a difficulty in reading. Vision means but taking my situation to consideration, I design my website on my phone, and I have to include that function as well. So when the article picture is right from the article, why not take that inclusivity into consideration? Because that means that according to my thinking, I consider that as a good journalism practice. Journalism practice.
Thank you for your proposal. I have a question for Merl about misinformation. Your work focuses on AI models, how to use data to tackle societal challenges, especially in combating misinformation. In the context of Sinhala language news, how can AI tools and data-driven interventions help journalists and fact-checkers to more effectively detect misinformation?
I don't think I have a straightforward answer, but generative AI can certainly help. I would not rely on any kind of AI to determine if something is true or not. But there are other ways of getting at the truth. Say, for example, if it's a complex topic where the truth is not black and white, you can't just say this is true or false. You need to like set enormous amount of context. Like the research process of finding. I mean, for example, before anything, the large language model space, I think, is now becoming increasingly better at Sinhala. I think you can like attest to this. And I don't think it's quite there at the level of like English, but it's certainly capable of giving out information, answer queries, and even research certain topic. So like just finding out all the relevant contextual information about a piece of news, whether it's investigative piece of journalism, that you can do, I think, fairly quickly. And I think even, for example, generally about, I'm not speaking about like the veracity of any particular piece of information, but generally as journalists, and I think generative AI is perhaps the best tool ever invented to learn things. Because if you want to quickly get up to speed on a particular topic that you're covering, that's it's like different people, different concepts, there's historical context. I think there's no better tool than generative AI. So like just that process of like absorbing information and being conversant. And then there are other tools such as, I mean, if you like design the right kind of like custom tooling, you can, I mean, especially if you're covering a certain kind of political topic, you can create triggers and alerts of where this topic is being talked about. There are things these days called AI agents, which you can run on a frequent basis. If you set up in a certain way, you can get like pockets and just like summaries of information where this topic was covered, by whom, what have they talked about, such that like you have a constant stream of information that you can consume even in Sinhala. This is now like the Sinhala single available capability with large language models, where you know, like if you feel responsible about a certain topic and how this is being talked about, you can create alerts for yourself, smart alerts. I know even previously with Google, you could do keywords and like get certain like RSS feeds and so on and so forth, but it's much smarter these days. And yes, and you can especially like if you want to like, I mean, like there are like, I think your previous training session would have equipped you with some of these things as well, like summarizing things, identifying like the key claims and all of those things. I think some of it is even available as generate tools, but also there are like things to be done if you want to create custom tool for yourself. I don't think like the capabilities of language is any longer a barrier in this space. I know it's not perfect, but like nothing is perfect. Nothing in English is even perfect. So you learn to work with them, knowing that the language models you see today are the worst language models that they are ever going to be. They're only going to improve.
Amal, after 35, 40 plus years of journalism, your experience, watching the industry transform completely, what do you honestly believe as unique values that AI and technology cannot replace in journalism?
Talk about 4 decades, basic journalism has not really changed. It's remained the same. The basic values of the values that we have, uh, how we write our stories. I mean, basically the who, what, when, where, all that stuff has not really changed. But the way we communicate or way we get our message across to the audiences have really changed. I mean, I joined Lake House at a time when we were printing using what was called hot metal. So that is, you had the printing press, and there's somebody who would actually, like a huge typewriter, would type onto a, like it's like typing onto a machine. Some of you may not know what a typewriter is, right? They, yeah, very few of us. We are a dying breed now. They, so we had this hot metal, and then from there we shifted to a cold process of having computers. So it's really evolved. I mean, the printing itself has evolved, and I think what we are also seeing is that we are no longer having newspaper organizations. I think all the newspaper organizations have also kind of converged to become media organizations. So today you have a newspaper which has radio and television. I mean, on the website, they have video, they have, I think Lake House also has a kind of an audio feed. So there is a convergence of all this. And the good thing is that still there is the credibility of the news organization, the credibility of the journalist, all that really matters. So, in spite of all the other technological developments, I really see them as a way to communicate our message better. And all this high tech is really, they are tools for us to do our job a little better. So, things have really made things have been made much easier for us. I mean, when I started working on the Daily News, to make a telephone call to the Panadura police station, we had to call the CTO, Central Telegraphic Office, and tell them that we want to talk to somebody in that police station and book a call. And I'm talking about 1981, not very long ago. And then you had, because you were a journalist, you had priority, and they would get you the call in about 4 or 5 hours. Right? Some people would have to wait for several days to get a call. So this is how things have evolved. And then we are no longer. How many of you really worry about IDD calls? You know, in the 90s, if you had somebody living abroad, you were worried about whether your phone had IDD. Now nobody has IDD on their phone. I think they have it, but they never use it, right? Nobody uses a telephone line to call somebody in Australia or in London. You're on WhatsApp, or you're using some app to talk to people. So technology has evolved, but in terms of basic, coming back to core our core values, I think have not really changed. So we stick to our core values. I think, in spite of all the developments that are taking place, the way technology is evolving so rapidly, I really don't think it's really a threat. And it has really made our life so much easier. For example, earlier we had to transcribe, we tape record a conversation and you had to go back to office and transcribe. And that would have taken us at least half an hour if you're really good with your shorthand, right? But now I come back to office, and in less than 2 seconds, I have the entire transcript, and with all, sometimes I can even ask it to change, correct spelling and all that. So these are tools. These are AI tools, by the way. I mean, the transcribers are basically AI tools. So these really help us to do our job a little better. And then the ditto same goes for central bank reports, IMF reports. IMF comes out with Sri Lanka's governance report, which is like 300 pages. You just put it into AI and say, just give me the summary of the main points, but also give me the references. So I need to go back and verify, because very often AI gets it wrong. So, but if you write your prompts correctly in a sort of a better way, you can get better results. So over the years, the technology has changed. So I don't really worry too much about losing our jobs to a AI bot. I don't think that's really going to happen, because there are a lot of things that we as journalists can do, which AI still can't do. AI still can't go and, as I told you before, can't go and interview somebody. And AI can make up stories. AI can actually give you good quotes, manufacture quotes, but they are not. That is fiction. So we are not talking about journalism. So really, the journalists, I think we don't have to worry too much. We have some issues right now, but I think in spite of all this technology evolving, still the prospects for journalism, I think, are still very good. Still, it's still there. I think I'm optimistic.
Just a saying, no, like AI won't replace you, but someone using AI it might.
So yeah, exactly.
And before we close, stop writing your prompts, right? Everyone uses some Gen AI, right? Yeah, okay, one question. Don't write your prompts. This is going to change your life. Start dictating your prompts. When you write, your prompt is 3 lines. When you dictate, it becomes longer because you start talking to the AI, right? So make sure your prompt is at least 10 to 12 lines long, because depends on the context window you give, right? And I've found that I've given this advice to a lot of people and they've told me that this has changed their lives. Start dictating your prompts and don't write it. And we have one question.
Sometimes there are a lot of this quality, there are a lot of quality. So meet that quality, you are rewriting is only gain anything. So sometimes you are taking the original to match the social media quality. That's a challenge to define a person. We are trying to develop our own website. From these skills, the AI side, and we do globally. Like when we AI is not the answer. We don't need to learn on our website to get all this stuff. But again, one point, AI is a challenge in that one. And again, we are depending on social media as other than so. Sometimes we don't have a proper way to give the exact story to the and
I think
Yeah.
that is part of the question I asked. Please, it's open to all panelists.
I'll just start. I think platform dependence, like you said, is one of the biggest issues of journalism, right? Because we are dependent on the policies of these platforms. If you go to cover an international cricket story, you know you can't put even an image, you'll get a copyright strike. All these are problems, right? I feel like we need to take a hybrid approach. Yes, people are on these platforms, so it's easy to capture them. But long term, news agencies need to bring them to their own platform and bring them under a subscription model. This is what I've been harping for the longest time, right? No one has done this properly. Yes, you need to be discoverable on these platforms, play by their rules, get the viewership. But the long term strategy, if press in Sri Lanka is to survive, is to bring the audience to a monetized platform of your own, right? So this has a lot to do with community building, right? Because you need to build a good community to bring people. When I started the Daily Mirror news website back then, we called it the 24/7 news website because we didn't have news websites back then. Now it's laughable to say 24/7 news website, right? When we started it, we had the best comment section in the world because when we put a story, at least 500, 600 comments per story we used to get. That audience died over time, not just with that platform, overall news platforms, because they got used to social media, right? However, if we had kept that audience, right, we could monetize them still today, right? So my advice is it should be 50-50, right? Your efforts when it comes to digital media should be 50% on platforms that are mostly US and China based, and you should put 50% effort to your own platform. Bring audience there, even if it's 10,000 people paying 5,000 rupees a month. That's still an audience that you don't have to waste and have issues like Amal said, where you have advertiser pressure, right? Because I think that's the long term strategy, Amal. Because if you have subscribers, you don't have advertiser pressure to censor anything, right? So this is the strategy. It's just that no one has done it. Like in the UK, a lot of news organizations have done this successfully, right? So we can do this. It's just that we have to have someone with the vision and drive it. So my advice, long term, 50% on other platforms, 50% on your own platform, your own, right? So right now it's easy, right, to put it on YouTube. No server costs, audience is already there, everything is there. Exactly, right? At the end, you're depending on another platform's policies, and they don't even have an office here, right, to get support when there's an issue. So you have to have our own, we have to have our own OTT platform, right? So these are not costly affairs now, to be honest. It's just that you have to have a strategy and build it. So if you can base like most of your effort on your own platform and use the other platforms to drive. See, at the end of the day, everything we do digitally has to have a CTA. This is something I say, right? A call to action. What is your call to action when you put a news, right? You have to bring them to your platform because at the end of the day, you're not asking people to go and protest because you put a news, right? But your call to action should be, okay, we are trustworthy. We are, we are building a community of, people who believe in genuine news, right? Come to our platform. That should be your call to action when you publish news online.
Well, do you have anything to add to that question? We have another question. Yes, please go ahead. Can we pass the mic?
Essentially, the apprenticeship to social media, new media. Challenging is a time frame. Social media needs a meta or reels. They need to expressing that. So we are many things to you for ours and for that. So how can we control it?
I think Amal.
I think when you transition, if I can summarize your question, when you transition to digital, you need to do different types of videos, and you're finding it challenging that you have to make like vertical. So
I think he's talking about deadlines.
time is the issue when you publish videos.
Yeah, we have
Yes. Okay. Okay.
more things in YouTube. But we don't get much people.
Understood. So I think as news brands, you should not strive to be the first. because right now that is a very saturated area, right? Breaking news is a very saturated area, right? uh, one piece of news, we track this, right? The same video of someone speaking at a outside I think the CID was published by 300 YouTube channels within the span of 4 minutes, and that included 10 mainstream media channels in Sri Lanka, rest all creators and these digital only news outlets, right? So how are you going to compete in a oversaturated place like that? Your strength is the details, right? You all know more details, you all are more in depth, right? So that's what we should sell, right? So don't try to, I mean, if you want to be a breaking news outlet, by all means try it. It's very saturated. But where you should, your USP, right? When you're selling a product, when you're doing any business, you're thinking about your unique selling proposition, right? So as your news brand, decide, okay, this is our unique selling proposition, right? Now, like when Nista started FT financial, like any financial news, you go there, right? So your news brand, what's your USP, right? We are more culturally nuanced, right? We are more sensitive, we are more inclusive, right? So that should be your, focus, not just to beat other people and publish this first, right? So I know this is a very holistic approach without me saying no, use these tools to publish first. But if you go to publish first, I feel like it's still going to be saturated, right? And if I'm talking to a newspaper audience here, like the editorials here, I think your selling proposition is far more stronger than these people who are trying to do the breaking news.
I think I can do an interesting analogy from something completely different. It's like phone reviews. You see the unboxing video, and then you see like 2 weeks use video, then you see 6 months use video, and each has a different segment. And I, like, not having like the budgets to buy the latest phone, I didn't want the unboxing video. I went and watched someone who had reviewed like the 2 versions ago phone after 1 year of using it. So I'm not saying it perfectly maps to what you are just saying, but there is value to like how a story develops and what's maybe the second take and what's maybe even the final take. Maybe there are like definitive takes to be done. Like maybe it's a slightly different audience. Like figuring out your niche, I think is absolutely critical.
Before we wrap up, I have a question to. Yes, please. Go.
At that time, I saw the India Today, the chief technical officer talking about the AI integration model for India Today. And then I also remember the same platform we had this gentleman in German, right? And so when we spoke with him, he was basically saying that they're still exploring as to how they could look at AI in newsroom. But today we're talking about September. Any idea? My first question is, any idea as to how AI is being adopted in the broadcaster segment of the news? I don't know, the newspapers, it's different level, but in the broadcaster. The second question is, in times how you're all going to compete in the same digital platform, the broadcasters, as Amal said, also at some point in time, they are going to face the same thing that the newspapers are facing today. How much are the broadcasters prepared, and how much do you think their strategies are kind of stepping up to that?
Firstly, Kumar, the broadcasters are already feeling the pressure, right? Radio stations are not profitable anymore in Sri Lanka, right? They're making losses, right? So broadcast right now, without mentioning names, one of the two main technologies we are using right now is AI voice agents and AI avatars. So some of our biggest anchors, their voices have been cloned so that they can voice any news item without them being present. Number two, AI video avatars. It'll take some time before you see it in Sri Lanka, but it'll happen. You can train. I've trained my face on an AI model. I can get myself to say anything I want without me being there. So I can generate any piece of content. So that is going to completely change how we do things, right? Because you need a presenter to come in, put their makeup on, reduce all of that cost, and you can change the outfit 80 times of that same AI avatar. So these things are going to happen at scale, right? So video, if we are going to compete on mass video, it's going to be very difficult. So I think we have to come back to just what I answered when I answered this gentleman's question. It's the content that matters. So broadcasts, I think, is going to change a lot. Those are the two main technologies I see them using. They will face, they're already facing the crunch because Unilever in Sri Lanka, right? 3 years ago, they spent 15% of their budget on digital. Right now, that has gone up to almost 70%. So only 30% goes into television. Right? So that crunch that the newspapers felt 5 years ago, the broadcasters are feeling now. But at the end of the day, what everyone's forgetting is we are all looking at people's eyeballs, right? We just want to create an audience. In Sri Lanka, what we are failing to create is we are getting an audience. We are failing to create community. If we create community, I think that's where we will win, right? Every news brand, if we can create a very loyal community, right, that trusts you and they amplify our news, I think that's where we should go. But in terms of technology, there's a lot. So in terms of broadcast, we're going to use voice agents and AI video avatars, and we're going to do this at scale. So we've already built AI agents to pick up on keywords and already voice the news before it even lands on the newsroom. So if you're going to compete on time, it's going to be very difficult.
I leave it like a general theory I have around how AI is going to transform like different industries, and I think like journalism is included. Then I'll leave it at that without even really getting into specifics. So AI fundamentally allows you to do, I think, three types of things. First is AI allows you to do things faster and more effectively, things that are already doing within your business models, within your organizational structures. AI also frees up time and allows you to do things that you could never do before, like creative things, but similarly, like your business model still remains the same. But AI allows you to fundamentally rethink how you generate revenue, your business models, what your relationship with your customers are. These are like fundamental shifts I think you need to start thinking about with the current capabilities of AI or any technology. Like, really understand deeply what these technologies are able to do and where the technology might be heading. Based on those capabilities, what is our relationship with the customer? Because at the end of the day, like you said, we are still competing for the same thing, but how can you reposition ourselves? I think like the answer to each answer differs from like industry to industry. For education it's different, for journalism it's different, for health it's different, but I think those are the three things you need to be like thinking about.
Lastly, not to gatekeep, to create voice agents, use Leven Labs. That's the best one out there. And to create your own AI avatar, use Heygen, Heygen. Thank you. It's a 15%. I think. No, I don't get any commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Kumar, for the question. Before we wrap up, I just have one more question for all the panelists. If you had to give one piece of advice to a journalist starting today who is trying to tell important stories, navigating with algorithm, misinformation, audience pressure, what would that be?
I always have the same thing, experiment. Like it's a very, I know, micro advice, because you figuring out what works for you, I think really begins with experiment. And AI is also have this weird property of it can do like very complex thing amazingly well, but it fails at the most basic thing. There's this phenomena called jagged frontier, where like the frontier is not smooth. It has this like jagged nature to it. So you need to figure out for yourself for your particular task what works. It depends on like the task, it depends on the models, like your way of thinking, your way of organizing information, because like the way the what notebook LM allows you to do is very different from what Gemini allows you to do, even though they are based on like the same types of models. So like experiment.
Thank you. How about Amal?
My advice to anyone is that look for another job. I, seriously, it's not a profession. It's not recognized by any professional body. So, but if you're really crazy and really bent on getting into this, then I would say it's a very rewarding. It's not a financially rewarding job, but otherwise, if you have parents to subsidize you for the rest of your life, it's not a bad thing. And that's why I told my two kids, whatever you do, you're not going to be journalists. So the that's it.
I feel like I had to say something more positive. So, okay. I think one of the biggest career advice I give kids these days is whatever job you're thinking, add the word AI to the beginning, right? So we have like video editors, think you're going to be an AI video editor, supplement whatever you're doing with AI. So for journalism also, that's my biggest advice. Think of yourself as AI journalist, right? By that, I mean, you use AI to supplement you along the way, but you still have your editorial integrity, which none of these LLMs have, because they are based on data that is very biased, and they don't have any South Asian cultural context whatsoever to have any sensitivity to the issues that we face, right? So you are very important. Use AI to be more important. If you're an individual working for a big news organization, build your personal brand along it, because that will give you financial freedom. Because right now, with Facebook, you have Facebook monetization, right? There's a lot of ways you can earn money as a journalist, right? So it's just how creative you are. But look at yourself. One, think of AI as a tool, use it, and also build your personal brand as a journalist. That's my advice.
Thank you, Janeeth, and our panelists, and also the audience for joining us. So, before we wrap up, what I'm taking away is that although algorithms are very powerful, we still have the fundamentals of journalism, and that's our defense. And also, there are so many opportunities for AI to help journalists to do their job faster, better. Thank you on behalf of Sri Lanka Press Institute. Thank you for organizing this conversation. Thank you, all friends. Have a good day. Thank you so much.